This week we're looking at number 11, New Covenant Sanctuary it's called, in our series on the promised God's everlasting covenant. And the first thing to say is the Bible doesn't ever speak about a new covenant sanctuary. So those words are the title, but they don't really relate to something biblical here. So we need to think a little bit about this. The sanctuary, we know about the sanctuary. We have the earthly sanctuary and all the details very, very minutely were given to Moses by God about how that sanctuary was to be put together and what it was supposed to contain and so on. And many people have looked at that sanctuary and examined in great detail the laver for washing, the table of showbread, the altar of incense and everything else. But as we're told there in Hebrews, our material for this time, including Exodus, Isaiah and 1 Timothy, the earthly was a copy of the heavenly sanctuary. And yet, because we only know the earthly sanctuary, our tendency is to make the heavenly sanctuary a copy of the earthly. No, it's not. We are living with the copy. The shadow, in fact, you can also say. It's a shadow of what the reality is. Now, what about a shadow? A shadow here against the wall. What do we see? If you see a shadow of someone's face, what can you make out from it? Well, you might know a little bit about their facial features, shape of their nose and something about their hair and so on. But you wouldn't know their hair colour, you wouldn't know their eye colour, you wouldn't know what they were saying, you wouldn't know anything about them except that shadow. And that's the challenge when you're dealing with a shadow. We get so little information. Now, it was useful at the time, and God used this, what could you say, extended parable, this picture language, to try and help the people to understand what was going on and what needed to happen in their lives. But as Hebrews says, the whole sacrificial system doesn't work. As we mentioned last time, Hebrews says it's impossible for the blood and bulls and goats to wipe away sin. Just doesn't happen like that. God is the one who helps us, heals us, restores us. The sins are there. They have to be dealt with, especially the guilt that we feel. But you can't move them around. We like to talk about them being thrown into the depths of the sea because we want them long gone. But what we did, we did. And I don't think we really understand that. We would like for them to be completely wiped out, erased, blotted out, all that language. But the record is there. That's part of the evidence. The good news is that God says, this person has changed. This is not who he or she is anymore. And that is why they can be part of my kingdom. That's the truth about how God deals with us sinful rebels. He changes us. He remakes us. He just doesn't declare us right when we're not. I mean, you can dispense with all this imparted righteousness stuff. God is the one who's healing the damage of sin and making us into the beings we should have been. Thinking about what we will be like. That is what we are, counted as being righteous, as God said about Abraham. So, in terms of the sanctuary, let's not get sidetracked into too much of the detail. It is representative. God gave it as I said, an extended parable, a way of helping them to deal with things in terms of the concepts that they were familiar with. These were people coming out of slavery in Egypt. They knew Egyptian religion. They knew about temples and all the rest of it. And this whole idea of sacrifice and making things right. Even this idea of the atonement is problematic if you want to see it that way. We talk about being at one with God, and that's atonement. But in the language, even the altar in the tabernacle, that was required to be atoned for. In other words, made right. So as you think about these things, I encourage you not to get too much into this sanctuary minutiae, but to recognize that God is always trying to help us to see him more clearly and come back to him and ask him to make us into the kind of people that we really should be.